In every village, there are stories that are told openly, stories that are whispered, and stories that are never spoken aloud. The ones never spoken are the most dangerous, because silence allows them to grow roots. This is the story of such silence. A silence born inside a marriage, nurtured by love, protected by trust, and fed by the night. Long ago, in a village surrounded by thick forests and winding ancestral paths, lived a man named Obinna. He was not a man of great wealth, nor was he a man of great ambition. He was known instead for something rarer: steadiness. Obinna woke before the sun, worked the land with patience, and returned home before darkness fell. He greeted elders with respect and spoke little unless spoken to. In a land where loud voices often ruled, his quiet nature earned trust. When Obinna married Zainabu, many believed the ancestors had finally rewarded his humility. Zainabu was admired in the village. She was graceful, calm, and carried herself with a dignity that made people lower their voices around her. She did not gossip. She did not quarrel. She smiled gently and spoke with care. Together, they seemed balanced, like day and night living peacefully side by side. For the first year of their marriage, nothing appeared unusual. Their hut was filled with warmth. At night, they spoke softly of small dreams, better harvests, stronger roofs, children who would run barefoot through the compound. Obinna trusted her completely. In his mind, trust was not something earned daily. It was something given once and guarded fiercely. The first sign came quietly, the way dangerous things often do. One night, Obinna woke to an unfamiliar stillness. The mat beside him was empty. At first, he assumed Zainabu had stepped outside briefly. He waited, listening to the night insects and the distant call of an owl. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. When she returned, she moved carefully, as if trying not to disturb the air itself. She smelled faintly of smoke and damp earth. Obinna asked nothing. He told himself she had gone to pray, or to help a neighbor, or to relieve herself farther from the hut. Love supplied 1,000 excuses before suspicion could form one question. The following night, it happened again. And the night after that. Always after midnight. Always silent. Always returning before dawn. Zainabu never appeared tired. She never explained. When Obinna finally asked, gently, she smiled and said she had been praying. In the village, prayer was sacred. Questioning prayer was dangerous. Obinna nodded and said no more. But something inside him shifted. As weeks passed, Obinna noticed small changes. Zainabu's presence seemed heavier, as if the air bent around her. When she spoke, people listened more closely. When she walked through the village, conversations slowed. Meanwhile, Obinna found himself waking tired, even after full nights of sleep. His dreams became strange. He dreamed of standing in dark forests while unseen voices whispered his name. He dreamed of fire without warmth and shadows without bodies. Still, he said nothing. Silence had become a habit. The village began to change too, though few connected it to Zainabu. Disagreements ended when she intervened. Elders nodded thoughtfully when she spoke. Opportunities seemed to bend in her direction. Meanwhile, Obinna's crops weakened. His hands trembled sometimes without reason. His laughter grew rare. At night, he lay awake, listening to her breathing, waiting for the moment she would rise. And every night, she did. One evening, Obinna noticed something new. As Zainabu prepared to leave, she wrapped a dark cloth around her head, one she never wore during the day. She tied it carefully, almost reverently. There was purpose in her movements, not secrecy born of fear, but confidence born of routine. That night, something inside Obinna refused to remain still. When Zainabu stepped outside, he followed. Barefoot, heart pounding, breath shallow, he kept his distance as she moved through the sleeping village. She did not look back. She did not hesitate. She walked past the farms, past the shrines, past the last huts where dogs stirred uneasily as she passed. Beyond that lay the forest. Not the friendly edge where children gathered firewood, but deeper, older land. A place elders warned against without explaining why. Obinna had never crossed that boundary. But love pushed him forward. Inside the forest, the air felt different. Thicker. The sounds of insects faded, replaced by an unnatural quiet. Zainabu moved as though guided, weaving between trees with certainty. Obinna followed, careful not to break twigs or disturb leaves. His heart pounded so loudly he feared it would betray him. Then he saw the clearing. Stones arranged in a perfect circle. Symbols carved deep into the earth, glowing faintly as if breathing. At the center, a fire burned without wood, its flames dark at the edges. Zainabu stepped into the circle and began to chant. The voice that came from her mouth was not her own. It echoed as though many voices spoke through one throat. The ground seemed to vibrate. Shadows gathered, not cast by the fire, but moving independently, forming shapes that suggested presence without form. Obinna felt his knees weaken. Then Zainabu spoke words that shattered him. She asked for power. And she offered him. A branch snapped beneath Obinna's foot. The chanting stopped. Zainabu turned. Their eyes met. She smiled. Obinna ran. He did not remember the path back. He did not remember breathing. He only remembered the certainty that something fundamental had broken, something that could not be repaired. By the time he reached their hut, his chest burned and his limbs shook uncontrollably. He told no one. He hoped silence could undo what sight had done. But from that night, Obinna began to fade. His strength left him slowly, as though drained drop by drop. His skin dulled. His voice weakened. His reflection no longer felt like his own. Meanwhile, Zainabu grew stronger. Her presence commanded attention. People deferred to her instinctively. Fear mixed with admiration in their eyes. The balance had shifted. And balance, once broken, always demands payment. Obinna began to dream of the clearing every night. He dreamed of standing in the ritual circle while unseen hands reached for him. He dreamed of Zainabu watching without emotion. He dreamed of roots wrapping around his feet, pulling him into the earth. During the day, he grew quieter. Neighbors noticed. Elders exchanged looks. Whispers began to circulate. Eventually, the elders summoned the oracle. After listening carefully, the oracle's face darkened. She spoke slowly, choosing words with care. She said a bond had been broken. A ritual had been sealed. A life was feeding another life. And the one who had seen what he was never meant to see could not be saved easily. They prepared to act. But rituals completed in secrecy do not wait for permission. Before sunrise, Obinna collapsed. By morning, he was gone. Zainabu did not cry. She simply looked complete. Years later, travelers claim they hear a man's voice whispering warnings from the forest. They say love can blind. They say silence can kill. And they say some rituals do not end. They wait. Obinna's death did not arrive with screams or spectacle. It arrived quietly, like everything else that had destroyed him. By the time the sun rose, his body lay still on the mat where he had collapsed, eyes open, staring at nothing. The village woke to the news in disbelief. A man who had never quarreled, never taken excess, never offended the spirits, was gone without illness, without warning. Zainabu sat beside his body, calm and composed. She did not wail. She did not tear her clothes. She did not beat her chest the way widows were expected to. Instead, she placed her hands gently on her knees and stared straight ahead. Some villagers whispered that grief had frozen her. Others felt something colder move through them when they saw her face. The elders came to perform the rites. As they washed Obinna's body, they noticed strange marks on his skin, faint lines like shadows pressed into flesh. No wound bled. No illness explained them. The oracle watched silently, her eyes heavy with knowledge she did not yet speak aloud. Obinna was buried before sunset, as tradition demanded. But the earth resisted him. The grave collapsed twice before it finally held. Dogs howled throughout the night. The wind circled the compound without touching it, as though the air itself avoided the place. After his burial, Zainabu's life changed rapidly. People sought her counsel. Disputes resolved themselves in her presence. Crops near her hut flourished while others struggled. When she spoke, elders listened longer than they meant to. When she walked, children stepped aside instinctively. She never demanded authority. It came to her as though summoned. At night, she still left the hut. But now, no one followed. Fear had replaced curiosity. What the village did not know was that Zainabu's path to the ritual had begun long before Obinna ever noticed her nightly absences. As a child, Zainabu had been overlooked. She was neither the strongest nor the most favored. Her voice was soft, her presence easily forgotten. She watched as others were chosen, praised, lifted. And somewhere in that quiet watching, something hardened inside her. She began to listen more than she spoke. She learned where the village hid its truths, in whispers, in half-finished warnings, in forbidden names spoken only by the very old. It was her grandmother who first mentioned the forest. Not directly. Never directly. She spoke of power as something that moved beneath the land, older than names, older than gods. She spoke of bargains that ancestors once made when hunger and war pressed too close. She spoke of spirits that fed on devotion, fear, and sacrifice. And she warned that such power always demanded something living. Zainabu listened. Years later, when she married Obinna and felt the familiar ache of being unseen return, those stories resurfaced. Love did not erase her hunger. It only masked it. The first night she entered the forest, she trembled with fear. The second night, with anticipation. By the third, the spirits recognized her. They tested her resolve, demanding offerings, patience, silence. They watched her closely. And eventually, they asked for proof. They did not name Obinna. They did not need to. When Zainabu offered him, they accepted. But spirits never take what is given cleanly. They take more. They leave traces. They bind the giver and the offering together long after the exchange is complete. That bond did not end with Obinna's death. As seasons passed, strange things began to happen in the village. Children fell ill without cause. Livestock wandered into the forest and never returned. Nightmares spread like sickness. People dreamed of fire circling stone, of chanting without mouths, of a man calling out from beneath the ground. The oracle grew weaker each time she attempted to intervene. The spirits no longer answered her fully. Something older had claimed dominance. Zainabu began to change. At first, it was subtle. Her shadow lagged behind her movements. Her reflection sometimes smiled when she did not. She spoke Obinna's name once in her sleep and woke screaming, clutching her chest as though something inside her struggled to escape. One night, she returned from the forest and found her hut cold. The fire would not light. The air smelled of damp soil. And she heard a familiar voice whisper her name. She knew then that power had finished feeding. Now it wanted balance. The village elders finally acted, gathering courage from desperation. They confronted Zainabu, accusing her openly for the first time. She did not deny them. She only listened. When they demanded she undo what she had done, she laughed softly. Undoing, she said, was never part of the bargain. That night, the forest answered. A storm unlike any other tore through the village. Trees bent toward the clearing. The ground split near Zainabu's hut. Shadows rose where light should have been. The spirits came to collect what remained unpaid. By morning, Zainabu was gone. In her place stood a tree, twisted and hollow, its roots shaped like reaching hands. The air around it felt heavy. No birds perched on its branches. No child dared touch it. The storm ceased. The village slowly healed. But the tree remained. And on quiet nights, when the wind moves just right, some swear they hear two voices whispering from its hollow trunk. One begging, one answering. Because power taken in secret never leaves quietly. Years passed, but the tree never aged. Its bark did not crack with time, and its leaves did not fall in season. While other trees bloomed and withered, it stood unchanged, as though time itself avoided it. The villagers learned to build their paths around it. No one cut its branches. No one leaned against its trunk. Even the bravest hunters lowered their voices when passing near it. Children were warned never to play close. Not with threats. With fear-filled stories. They said the tree listened. They said it remembered. At night, the whispers grew clearer. Some heard Obinna's voice first. Soft. Regretful. Calling names of people long dead. Others heard Zainabu, calmer, colder, as though instructing something unseen. Those who heard both never spoke of it again. They only avoided the place afterward, their eyes dull, their sleep broken. The new oracle, a woman younger but burdened with inherited knowledge, began to dream of the tree even before she was chosen. In her dreams, roots spread beneath the village like veins. They wrapped around huts. They touched cradles. They reached into graves. Whatever lived inside the tree was no longer satisfied with silence. Power, once awakened, seeks continuity. One season, the rains failed. Crops withered in fields untouched by the tree's shadow. Yet near the cursed ground, yams grew thick and heavy. The earth around it remained dark and fertile. Hunger forced choices that fear had delayed. At night, villagers crept close, leaving offerings. Grain, oil, blood from small animals. The tree accepted, and it remembered who fed it. Soon, those families prospered while others suffered. Disputes arose. Accusations spread. Old alliances fractured. The village began to divide, not by lineage or belief, but by proximity to power. The elders realized too late that Zainabu's bargain had not ended with her. It had only changed form. The spirits had found a new way to feed. Through dependency. Through desperation. Through human choice. The oracle warned them. She spoke of cycles, of how ancient forces survive not through domination but through invitation. She begged them to stop approaching the tree, to starve it of attention. But hunger is louder than wisdom. Fear makes people rationalize what they once condemned. Then the children began to change. A boy was born without crying. He stared instead, eyes too alert for a newborn. A girl spoke her first words not to her mother, but to the tree, pointing at it and smiling. Another child wandered into the forest one night and returned by dawn unharmed, silent, and no longer afraid of darkness. Parents whispered excuses. Strong imagination. Blessings. Destiny. But the oracle knew. The tree was planting itself forward in time. One night, the oracle went alone to the clearing. She carried no offerings. Only truth. She spoke the old names. She reminded the spirits of balance, of consequences they once respected. The wind listened. The leaves trembled. And the tree spoke back. Not in words. In memory. The oracle saw Zainabu as she truly was in the end, not powerful, not victorious, but bound. Rooted. Conscious. Trapped between command and obedience. She saw Obinna still present, still aware, his silence forced, his suffering sustaining the bond. Power had not freed Zainabu. It had imprisoned her in permanence. The spirits revealed their purpose then. They were not evil. They were ancient. They existed to test humanity's restraint. When ignored, they slept. When sought, they consumed. Not out of cruelty, but function. The oracle understood the final truth. The village itself had become the ritual. To end it, something worse than sacrifice was required. Renunciation. At dawn, she gathered the people. She told them everything. Not with fear, but clarity. She gave them a choice: continue feeding the tree and inherit its slow corruption, or abandon the land entirely and let the forest reclaim what was owed. Leaving meant loss. Homes. Graves. Identity. Staying meant becoming part of something that would outlive them all. One by one, families chose. Some left at sunrise, carrying what little they could. Others stayed, kneeling by the tree in quiet defiance. No one stopped either group. Judgment had passed. By the next full moon, the village stood half empty. The tree began to weaken. Its leaves dulled. Its whispers faded. Roots withdrew from abandoned huts. Power without worship thinned like smoke. But where people remained, it grew stronger. Years later, travelers would pass through the area and find two villages instead of one. One thriving in ordinary ways, slow and honest. The other silent, prosperous, untouched by time, surrounded by a forest that never let outsiders linger. And deep within that forest, a tree still stands. Listening. Waiting. Because power does not chase. It waits for those willing to choose it over everything else. Time moved differently around the second village. Travelers who wandered too close often said the air felt heavier, as though every step required permission. Birds avoided the canopy. Insects made no sound. Even the wind seemed cautious, slipping through leaves instead of shaking them. Those who lived there called it peace. Outsiders felt it as warning. The people who remained had prospered. Beyond expectation. Their crops never failed. Illness rarely lingered. Children survived dangers that should have killed them. And yet, something subtle began to erode what could not be seen. Laughter became rare. Joy became controlled. Love became conditional. Children born near the tree grew quickly, not in size but in awareness. They watched adults with eyes that measured rather than admired. They asked questions that unsettled their parents. Questions about death. About sacrifice. About whether loyalty was stronger than love. The elders noticed that the children did not dream. Or rather, they dreamed together. At night, several would rise from their mats at the same hour and walk toward the tree without speaking. They would stand beneath its branches until dawn, faces calm, expressions empty, as though listening to a voice that did not need words. Parents tried to stop them. The tree stopped the parents. Illness returned suddenly, but only to those who resisted. Crops failed in single fields, while neighboring plots flourished. The lesson was never spoken aloud, yet everyone understood. Obedience preserved comfort. Resistance invited loss. The oracle who had led the people away was long gone now, but her words survived in fragments, passed quietly among those who left. They warned their children never to seek easy power. Never to bargain with forces that did not age. Never to mistake provision for blessing. Meanwhile, in the power village, memory began to thin. People forgot faces of those who left. Then they forgot names. Then they forgot that there had ever been another choice. History became shallow. Everything before the tree blurred into irrelevance. Except one thing. The ritual. It evolved. No longer secret. No longer forbidden. It became ceremonial. Honored. Taught. Children were trained to prepare offerings, not of blood at first, but of silence, of devotion, of surrender. They learned to speak to the tree without fear. They learned which emotions to suppress and which to feed. The tree did not demand cruelty. It demanded priority. One generation later, the first child chosen was celebrated. He was calm, intelligent, detached. When he stood beneath the branches, the tree bent toward him, leaves trembling. The people watched in awe as roots shifted, reshaping themselves around his feet without harm. They called him blessed. They did not call him bound. As the years passed, the boundary between village and forest dissolved. Huts were rebuilt closer to the trunk. Paths disappeared. The tree became the center not just of worship, but of identity. And then one night, the whispers changed. They grew restless, sharper, urgent. The tree had fed for generations. It had grown vast beneath the earth, its roots extending far beyond the forest, touching lands unknown. What had once been sustained by attention now required permanence. The spirits spoke of expansion, of legacy, of the need for a final anchor. The chosen child, now a man, was brought before the tree. He did not resist. He had never known a life outside obedience. The elders sang. The villagers watched. The air thickened with anticipation and fear disguised as reverence. The tree opened. Its bark split slowly, revealing an interior not hollow, but alive. Pulsing, breathing. The man stepped forward, and the forest screamed. Not in sound, but in sensation. Animals fled. The sky darkened. The roots surged upward, wrapping around him, drawing him inside. His face showed no pain, only understanding. The tree closed. From that moment, the village stopped aging entirely. But it also stopped changing. No verse. No this. No progress. People remained as they were, day after day, expressionless, sustained but static. Time passed around them, not through them. The forest thickened, sealing them in. Travelers who came too close forgot why they had arrived. Paths rearranged themselves. Compasses failed. Stories contradicted each other. Eventually, no one came at all. The world moved on. Empires rose and fell. Roads were built. Maps were redrawn. But deep within an unnamed forest, something remained preserved in its final choice. A village that chose power over freedom. A tree that no longer needed permission. And spirits that no longer tested humanity, because humanity had answered. Some elders say that if the forest is quiet enough, you can still hear breathing beneath the ground. Not struggling. Not resting. Waiting. Because power never ends stories. It only changes who gets to keep living them. Final moral. Power that asks for nothing is a lie. Power that asks for everything will eventually take it. And the most dangerous rituals are not the ones performed in darkness, but the ones repeated openly until they feel normal.